Hey, what's up, guys? So let me set the stage for you. This is probably 15 years ago now, 10 years ago. I just moved back home to Texas. I was already a third degree black belt in Shorin-ryu Matsubayashi, and I was looking to start a school of my own. But in the meantime, I was between schools and I was prepping for grad school. And so I stopped into this dojo. This is where I met my sensei. Honestly, I did a trial class there, and my first experience was him correcting a lot of my stances. And in my head going, man, I've already had a karate club of like 30 university students over the last 4 years. I'm already teaching, blah, blah, but why is he talking about my cat stance like that, blah, blah. So I kind of put that on the shelf after I met my sensei for the first time. I went to go start a kids class at the local YMCA. I did that for a couple of months. I think I did that for a semester of their schooling, but the entire time something was nagging me from what my sensei said. And so I went back to that school. I put on a white belt and I started from scratch. And keep in mind, this is starting from scratch after spending 15 years in martial arts since I was 5, and I was 20-ish, 21 at the time. But something was nagging at me. I was curious about it and put on the white belt and I started over. And that led me into learning Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu from him, because he put me on the ground and made me go roll with some of the brown belts, the karate brown belts. And I had no clue what I was doing. So the next week I enrolled in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school, and now I'm a second degree black belt in BJJ. But so one huge breakthrough moment after a couple years training with my sensei, flying to Okinawa, doing all these seminars, going to conferences, testing in Okinawa and stuff. I kept wondering how he was able to come up with all these bunkai, these applications for the katas that we do every single class down the line in rows in our grid formation with other students. And to tell you, he was a retired Green Beret at the time, an active Border Patrol agent down in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. So he was still actively arresting people on a shift-to-shift basis. And I always tell people, he would come to class and say, I used this move in kata today to arrest these guys, let's drill it. So that was kind of the mentality that we were introduced to. If you know me from my Karate Culture channel, me and Aaron, we've talked about this a lot, but it's been very hard to find an instructor with that hands-on experience and still promote and rely on kata for that experience. And he would say the katas are done everywhere, even in his military training. There's kata of drawing a weapon, kata of going through your formations when you enter a house, and all these things, right, from his military background. But one thing that was a big breakthrough for me, and I asked him, are you thinking of the kata as you do the technique on this resisting opponent, or is it after the fact? And he was kind of shocked, because he was never asked that question, and he was never able to explain it that way either. He answered, it's after the fact. And that moment really just shifted my perspective from learning kata and thinking that I would apply it, versus knowing kata as human movement, as movement patterns for combat. And then there's a missing middle part that everyone misses, and then you start applying it, right? And the missing middle part, the missing training that everyone forgets about, or everyone doesn't put enough time in, is the play. And I say play because anything that's not life and death to me is a game, right? So in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we roll on the floor with submissions and pins and stuff like that. But that's still a game because there's no strikes involved, right? So you can think of it as a spectrum of like solo drill by yourself on one end of the spectrum, On the other end of the spectrum is like fight to the death, right? And then how many ways can we add dots or lines on that spectrum to get as close to a fight to the death as possible without actually injuring each other while still learning, right? So if you think this is like the way end of the spectrum and this is the way beginning, you need to hit every single point on that to be able to apply what you learned in the kata on a resisting opponent. So some points on that spectrum can be partner drills, compliant partner drills. It can be partner drills with 50% resistance. It can be circling back to doing kata again so that you can correct what you messed up. It can be workshopping with a compliant, like a human dummy. It can be full-on sparring for rounds with gloves and shin guards. It can be taking out variables and just doing one skill set. It can be clinch fighting only. It can be grappling only, takedown only. All these little points on the way is to help you get good enough to feel confident in that life or that situation, right? And a lot of people, they kind of, and I'm going off on a tangent, but a lot of people, they rely heavily on the solo drill, the kata, and then they think they can skip all these points along the line and just say, now that I know the kata really well, I'm just going to apply it, which might work on an untrained person or might work just by chance. But if you think about how do I have a skill set or a group of techniques that I can use that will work with high confidence a majority of the time and is repeatable. And that little part at the end, and is repeatable, is super important. Because you want to think, yeah, I can throw like a flashy spin kick and it'll work on a unsuspecting person. But if I just spam that spin kick over and over again, is that really going to work? Maybe it will, depending on your training, right? So that really helps you think about, hey, I'm doing kata, and then I need to play in all these points. And then when I apply it, then the kata will kind of come out on itself, by itself. And what's cool about that is, as you're playing, you can say, and I say this every single time I train, hey, this felt like this movement in kata, right? This thing I just did with my arms felt like this in this kata that I drove by myself. And once you're able to continually say that on one specific movement, let's just say like Nahanchi, where you grab behind the head, throw the elbow, and you're like, okay, I've tried this a couple times, it's worked a couple times, I feel like I can now add that into my catalog for my application for this movement from the kata, right? So it's like, know the movement, play with it, make it repeatable, and now if it is repeatable, it's verified as a technique for that movement. And with that mindset, it allows you to really just not ignore, but it puts less weight on the historical application of a technique. And I say this all the time. It's cool to have historical knowledge. It's as a karate nerd, as a historian, as a hobbyist, it's cool to have these little tidbits. But also there's difference between knowing what it was historically made for and actually applying it on a modern day attacker, right? So historically, someone might be wearing armor. So historically, someone might be drawing a sword. And that's cool to know the application as it was used against those type of people. But nowadays, someone might have taken a couple months of MMA and they might know a little bit of grappling. How do we apply the movement patterns that we learn in the katas, which are universal, which I believe is universal, and how do we apply that on a modern assailant? And that's the freedom of saying the application comes after the fact allows you the freedom to think about kata outside of the box, right? Not in just a historical perspective, but in a combative sense for the modern fighter. So yeah, hopefully that was insightful. And I've been on this journey to try to spread that message. It's been like 8-9 years now, which is crazy to think. I think our first karate culture video was probably 8 years ago. Been through crazy ups and downs from there. Opened a school, closed the school, started a new channel, started websites, stuff like that. And the message has never changed. It is about combat, making karate as applicable as possible, because it is a skill set that can save your life one day. It is not just a sport. It is not just a health activity. It's not just an exercise. It has the potential to save your life, and I treat it that way. So, cool.